Hello and welcome to the first of the month. I'm Mick Fortune.
I'm Robbie Sinnott.
And today we're going to talk to you about Halloween and I suppose the origins of Halloween and Samhain, or whatever you want to call it, here in Ireland, and in paying particular attention to, I suppose, County Wexford, where both of us are from, and the kind of traditions that we kind of grew up with, I suppose, a source.
Well, technically, be Iha Hauna, because that's Halloween, literally the evening of the Hallowed time.
Yeah.
So that's the Iha Hauna, but the month itself, November, is Samhain.
Yeah. And actually, even just before we go to remind people, the 2 months previous to this were September and October, and in Irish there were Manfor and Derafor. And Derafor meant that Manfor was the middle harvest and Derafor was the end of the harvest. So we're actually at the time of the year now where it's the end of the harvest and we're heading into the dark, into the winter. So we're heading, and it's exactly 6 months to when we had when we put up the May bushes and celebrated the Bealtain, celebrated the coming of summer, really. So it's in May we celebrated the coming of summer with bonfires and May bushes and different things we put up, and now we're actually I suppose not celebrating, but we're marking that turn in the year, really, aren't we, into the dark.
And they're very much related, because the whole May Queen thing. But also, remember, doing the harvest episode, we were talking about the Colica, which is the sheaf which is put up, or the little bundles of wheat or corn that's put up around for instance, it's put up in the kitchen in some places, and that's more. The Colica means witch in Irish, but the Colica is the woman who she was turning from the beautiful maiden of summer into the Colica of winter. But the Colica of winter is where it all begins. So that's the whole the paradox. Celts loved the paradox and the boundaries, but it was everything began with the old woman, and Brigid herself, which is involved the 1st of February. She's very much, we were doing, go right back to the beginning of our first episode, and it's all related. It's all the one. It's just part of the cycle, except it begins with the old and goes to the young. The new year begins with the old, which is the beauty, and then it goes in halfway through, it becomes the young. Yeah,
and we're going to this term. It's interesting. We now call it, there's a kind of general term, we call it Halloween night, whatever. But if you go anywhere, again, I can give examples here from this part of Wexford. Blizzard night, snap apple night, bob apple night, black man night. But one of the terms which survived out in these hills just in front of us here was called Colica night. And Colica night, the colics were basically where people in disguise would call around to your house at Halloween, but it also called it for harvest, and it also called different times of the year. But tonight in particular, around the Bunclody district, the Carlow side of the Bunclody, I've come across people call it Colica night. And Colic comes again, as Robbie was saying, Colic was the winter witch, wasn't it?
It was. But remember the Isle of Man thing that we were both looking at recently, and they even had they were big into the witch thing, and they had a certain Ginny the Witch, certain rhyme about, and they when they'd be going around from house to house. So it's not coincidental that people associate Halloween with witches and all the rest of it, because it goes back to our old symbolism of the Colica and the winter. In fact, in Irish legend, the Colica Beara is the Irish foundation myth, effectively. It's that the Colica Beara collects in her, the old hag of Beara collects in her apron all these stones and drops them all over the country where we get our mountains. But also you've got the foundation myth of the Milesians coming into Ireland, and you've got they meet three old hags, Banba, Futla and Eru. That's the three names for Ireland. And they're absolutely distraught. They're in a terrible way. And it's the job of the Amergin, the druid, to try to make them laugh. And as soon as they start laughing, they become young maids, and they become Ireland. And that was the sovereignty. When she began to laugh each time, and the last one, the laughter bet all, like it went all over the country, and it's spring and summer. When the whole country went from winter to spring and summer, and they had the sovereignty.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to actually play that clip again of the women from Carlow talking about the Colic for those who didn't see it, and it was recorded only this year. My first term coming across it was in 2002 when I was working in Bunclody. And one thing as well, Robbie said it was the Colic, whatever was the last sheaf of oats or straw, was cut and brought in, and that was fed. What was interesting, it was hung up in the house at this time of the year. Maybe even a bit earlier, but it was hung up, but then it was kept up over the winter, and come the spring, if you survived winter, which that was the whole thing was about survival, getting through this dark period, getting through the winter or whatever, and then the Colic was fed to the horses, were fed to the cows, so again the whole cycle started again.
Remember, didn't they say in the Isle of Man as well that they were big into hitting something, a bun of cabbage or a stem of cabbage off the back door. Now, Kennedy speaks back in the early 19th century. He speaks of an old tradition where they'd actually bang the Colica, the sheaf. They'd bang it off a door and they'd say, "Hunger, hunger, go away to the Sassenach." Go away to they wanted the hunger to visit the English person instead of themselves for the winters. That was their prayer.
And that man in Cork that was telling me that he remembers his grandfather or grandmother banging the sheaves of corn off the four corners of the house to keep the hunger away from the house. And even I remember we were in an old house before, and there was a friend from Cork called in, and he came up with a loaf of bread, and before he even stepped over the threshold, he banged the loaf of bread off the door. So it'll always be this will kind of keep the hunger away from the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee,
and that was just a loaf of bread. Come here. I'm going. Well, I'll play these women from Carlow, right?
Brilliant.
Just get you. Let's listen to what a Colica was and the Colica dancing. So for those who missed it. And there was a term called, what was it called? Colcannon.
Colcannon, yeah. That's what we call it. Maybe it's an old Irish name. Or whenever we took it, Colica, or we'd do the Colcannon ourselves. People would say to one another, they'd say, "You're going to go Colcannon so-and-so night,
Nice.
And a few of us would meet up and we'd head off. We'd be trying to disguise ourselves, which we know well enough that unless you kept silent, they'd know the minute you opened your mouth who you were.
And when would you go Colcannon?
The night of the wedding or the night before?
No, I never went to anyone's afters, but we'd go in what do you call it?
Halloween.
Halloween, yeah.
All right.
That was always a night for everywhere around our area. And even the Church of Ireland, the Tackleberries of Ardine was big farmers, and they used to love it. They'd be always enjoying it. Yeah. And sometimes after a thrashing, that could happen, they'd go Colcannon, There'd be a dance after it. Most houses would be farmers' places.
So that was Tess and Nancy. But again, just to show you whatever before Christianity even ever came to Ireland, people were marking this time of year, and they were marking it in Wales, they were marking it in England, they were marking the Isle of Man. They were marking it with bonfires, Robbie, whatever. The fires were really, really important at this time of year.
I think the fire, every Celtic festival from February, May, August, and the main festivals of the year were always marked with fire. And I think it's, I don't know, there's so much symbolism involved. I suppose in Samhain it would have been, or Iahauna, it would have been the idea of, despite the darkness coming along, the obvious thing is, well, we still have the light and we still have the magic of fire, I suppose, Promethean myth, the idea that he rescued fire from the gods.
Yeah, and bonfires are still hugely popular. I'm sure people from the different fire brigade services around the country won't like to hear it, but they are.
And Guy Fawkes, by the way,
Yeah.
5th of November is more likely the time in the calendar that Iahauna would have been.
Yeah.
Because we're using the Roman calendar now.
Yeah.
But technically you would have been talking about the day that fits exactly between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, which is more likely to be around the 5th of November.
Well, like Guy Fawkes did, the man did exist too, though, didn't he?
That did happen, but
yeah.
it's just curious that they chose that date, and it's sort of again they're borrowing. I think it's sitting on top of old traditions. You know?
Yeah, there's a woman from Derry was telling me there only recently. She was saying as a child growing up in the 60s, they remembered making a little effigy of a witch out of like a little head and leaves and a little body on it, and burning it on Halloween night.
You see, let's go back. Remember, we were saying that maybe the 12th of July probably has some resonance with St. John's Day. You know, that they were borrowing from that tradition. So
I'll let you argue that one, right?
Well, no, taking away the bigotry bit. But apart from that,
but one of the things, there was a huge turning point, and I suppose I grew up on the coast of Wexford here. You grew up down in Tecumseh, down on the south coast of Wexford, right? Mm-hmm. The big turning point, I said, was the 8th century that we introduced All Saints' Day. And also, when All Saints' Day was introduced, basically because there were so many Saints' Days associated with certain saints that there were so many saints that didn't have a day. So basically, I think the Pope at the time basically created one day, so we'd all recognise. Now, typically Catholic Church, they created All Saints' Day first, and then All Souls' Day the second day. So the saints got kind of remembered first before the
Day of the Dead in Mexico, which but I think we always had it in Ireland, because remember the importance of the souls on Halloween night.
Yeah.
The Halloween night was the night that the dead came back.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we have that. Your man in Wales even saying it was the Isle of Man.
Yeah,
And it was wasn't it Isle of Man? He was saying again
yeah.
that he went out and his father saw his own father. That's your man's grandfather out, and he said, "Yours is the day and mine is the night."
Yeah.
And so your man never went out at Halloween at night time again.
Yeah.
So
That was one thing we grew up with. My mother said it's the days for the living and nights for the dead. That's what Mammy had at home. And people believed, and nowadays we have All Souls Day where people still will come back to it in a while, where people put a candle in the window and there were loads of rituals of what you did when the souls came wandering. But typically with Christianity, it was added on to what existed, or maybe actually the Christianity, the All Saints Day started that whole wandering souls thing. But we grew up in Ballygart with the idea was that on that night, on Halloween night, the souls came back and the living or the dead walked, and basically the story was that as children you dressed up to kind of fool the evil spirits, whatever. That was the kind of idea, because to be evil spirits come to take the souls of your loved ones, so you dress up to fool them. And that was a story we had. Whether it was any truth in it or not, that was the story we had. But I'm going to come back to that in a while. I'm going to come back to the whole thing about All Souls and All Saints, because it's really important. It's really important. But one of the things, come here to me, Robbie, was the names. So we were saying earlier on, like down where we grew up, was sometimes Halloween was called Visitor Night. It was called All Holland. It was called Hallows Eve. It was called Snap Apple Night, Bob Apple Night, Colica Night. So there were different names for it, and I'd have recorded different accounts in Tipperary. But here in Wexford, and the All Hallows Eve is coming from the All Saints Day that was introduced by the church. It was the evening of all of.
hallowed means just holy.
Holy, yes, exactly, yeah. So it was the eve of the Holy Day, and the Holy Day was the first of November.
All Saints Day.
All Saints Day, yeah. But the feast day thing is always interesting, Robbie. The idea of the feast, that kind of turning that the evening before.
Oh yeah, well, only in Celts, you see, in Celts, this is how it happens. The start of everything, just as everything starts with the old and goes to the young, it's the same with all Celtic festivals and days, whether it's Bealtaine, Brigade's Day, Lollabrige, or whether it's Lunasa or any of them. Yeah. The whole thing begins not when the sun comes up in the morning, but when the sun comes down on the eve. So the eve itself is actually more important even than the actual day itself. And in fact, it goes up until the sacred time is from when the sun goes down up until around midday the next day.
Yeah.
Then so like after midday on the 1st November, 1st of May or whatever, that's the liminal time is gone at that stage. So the important bit is when the sun goes down immediately on the 31st. Now let's say call it the 31st for argument's sake, or Iha Hauna, the night of Samhain. So that's when. So everything begins with darkness, begins with age. Everything begins with night, and the day follows. Yeah. That's the whole symbolism of it.
And that feast thing is really interesting as well. Some people say it's the pre-Christian, pre-All Saints Day, the introduction, that basically it was almost like one of the things we all grew up with was there was feasting, and obviously you always had a feast on the eve of the main day. Even with Christmas Eve, in some parts of in Mayo in particular, that have a meal on Christmas Eve, and most European countries they'll have a meal.
The 24th is more significant.
Yeah, then the Christmas.
But this is our New Year's. Effectively, the Iha Haun is our New Year's Eve.
Yeah, that's the thing. As Robbie said, we must stress is that this is the start of our year, our new year. Not forget your first of January. This is the start of whatever people call it now, the Celtic calendar now. But this was the start of going into, and you know what? When you think about it, it was like we've got lights and we've got electricity, we've got blah blah blah. But geez, only until again, as I said, we said before, 1950s, 60s. My mother and them were cooking everything on the open fire, and when you lived in the countryside, it was dark. Forget about you townies and city people, but us country people, and that cut off. And I keep having to stress it. That cut off, it's relatively new. When you think of those people, like again. I speak from your own mother's experience or your grandmother's experience. Like the lives that they lived hadn't changed that much
No.
In absolute centuries and centuries and centuries. And straight away it was like a big blunt hatchet came in the 1970s with the EU and with the EU regulations and new ways of living and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, the biggest thing was electricity from the 54 in Wexford, electrification, rural electrification scheme. But 62, we got our electricity only, because we refused, my grandparents refused to get it.
Yeah. Well, my granny only got a toilet in 95 or 96, right?
Well,
so it depends on what I suppose what social background you came from.
Our houses up in the Ford Mountain didn't have electricity till the 1990s. So,
yeah. So, but what we're saying is there was if you cast your mind back to that period, those people who lived in at that particular time, these things were important. You were going into the dark of the year. You had to have your spuds stored up in your potato pits from the harvest. You'd probably store up your apples the best you could. Your onions would be stored up, your carrots, your parsnips, whatever you had were dependent, because money wasn't part of the deal. People didn't have money. People, we didn't have professions the way we have professions now, where you went off and worked and got money.
Because I still have no money.
we don't have professions, Robbie. That's the problem, right? We don't have professional what we are. But come here. But one of the things was the whole feasting around nuts, berries, apples.
Because you couldn't pick any after Ihahauna.
Yeah.
Because who was the one pissed on the berries? Was it
Pooka
the
or the Fairies?
Or was the Fairies?
Or the witch sometimes, yeah.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Different people did different things. And there's some science behind that, because if they do go sour, it can be unhealthy to pick them after that time, So there may be some science behind these things.
So even the step back, so basically come Halloween night, many of the older people will remember this, games were played, bobbing for apples, hanging apples up of a piece of a string and trying to eat them. You'd feast on nuts, because there were no sweets. Even in my mother's time, there were very few sweets, the nuts and apples. So there were loads of games played around food, and there was loads of feasting. And as Robbie said, I can let you listen to someone now in a while, but people didn't. This is from the length and breadth of the country, from Wexford up to Donegal. You didn't touch the fruit after November's night. They call it in Mayo. Actually, they call it Halloween night, and this one November's night. You didn't touch it because the fairies were either pissing on them or spitting on them, and basically then
the game is interesting. You find games at wake games, for instance, and some of the games are similar to the Halloween games.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's one where they have the White Friar, whereas Kennedy speaks about it again from near Mount Leinster in the early 19th century. But you have your you build up this mountain of ash, white ash, and everybody takes a little bit away, and the one who manages this, it's a bit like that game of Junto. The one who manages to take the bit away that collapses the whole thing is the one who has to pay the forfeit.
Yeah.
Now, but a lot of the other games to do with food and all, they were to do with divination about who the girl's lover was going to be.
Yeah.
And just like May Day as well. Yeah. So one of the ones was where they had, Kennedy says this as well, where you have the two nuts in the fire, and if they explode, then that ain't going to be a match. It's not going to work. But if they don't, or if they explode together, it'll be they'll stay together. But if they don't explode at all, it's probably a good sign, that they'll be okay. But if one of them explodes and the other doesn't, that's not going to happen at all. So.
Come here, I'm going to come back to games in a second, because I actually have recordings of women in Donegal talking about that chestnut game you're on about. And the Kennedy that Robbie's talking about is a man called Patrick Kennedy. He actually was born only a couple of miles from here. He was talking 1800s. When was he writing, Robbie?
Well, he was writing in the mid 19th century, but he was remembering back to particularly between 1817 and 1822.
Yeah,
what the time was.
And he built up a huge collection of folklore and songs like the Bantry's Girl Laments. Tons of stuff he recorded in this part of County Wexford and Ireland as well when he left Wexford. But I'm going to go back to the thing about I want to show you the clip of these women talking about the fairies pissing on the fruit. And these was recorded in Mayo in 2007.
It was the 1st of
November.
Yeah. You would not. You were supposed not to touch a blackberry after that,
November,
because
they were out the night before.
They were out. Yes.
Last day in November.
November.
They peed on the blackberries.
And
the sloes.
The sloes.
And the sloes. The blackberries. And they were. You don't twist them after that.
It was all right to pick the blackberries or the apples, before November. But it seems the fairies were out November,
That's right.
And the November's night,
Full stop came, there was no...
no more after that.
Oh, we were sure of that, really.
Yes.
Because I remember one day we were told, you know, I was young that time, and I had one in my mouth, and you know, I was worried a bit. I threw it out, thinking that
and your heart to be broken, and you love it, you know.
The fairies used to wet them.
Yeah.
And you weren't supposed to eat any fruit of like sloes or blackberries or anything like that after November's night.
Yeah.
You couldn't eat the fruit in outside after that.
I never heard that. Oh yeah, after that the fairies would have done their business on them.
That's right.
The fairies would have weed on the after.
And the apples, and then you couldn't eat or sloes or nuts out. And
like you couldn't pull them off the.
You can't eat them anymore.
I know a fella, and no way would he eat after November's Day. Would he go near a blackberry? He wouldn't eat them.
No, we would not eat them. No. That fairy came around that night and he sprayed them all. Dear.
Yes.
So there we have it there, Robbie. Don't eat any fruit until after.
That pooka is also fairly... I don't know if it ever happened to you, but you could be kidnapped by the pooka.
Yeah.
And he'd take you away. Again, Kennedy talks about that.
Yeah.
And you take you away somewhere. Well, it's common. It's still common in many parts of Ireland folklore. But once the pooka takes you, you take you on a long ride.
Yeah.
And you have to hold on for dear life. And if you can manage to stay on him, he'll lave you back not too far from where you started off.
Yeah.
But it was many. Kennedy describes it as an excuse for truants for lads who were late for school.
Yeah, right.
Some of them claimed that they were kidnapped by the pooka, and he wasn't having any. So
well, I recorded a woman in Clonmel about 2-3 years ago, and she was saying that she remembers on Halloween night, so the pooka would come around, and the pooka would you'd actually put crosses over the door, I think it was, to stop the pooka taking children, because the pooka take children. And she's on some lovely clip where she says her grandmother sprinkles holy water on the pooka and says, "Snotty nose, I'll drown you." Yes, snotty nose, I'll drown you. But you said there was something about snotty nose to me.
There's a Wexford town expression. It was something like as miserable as the 7 snotty nosed dwarves or something. I think there's something about the snotty nose now. In Ireland, in Irish, I think it's smuishach. Means snotty, so I'll slide on smuishach. It was snotty cold.
Yeah.
Smuishach, lovely. It's onomatopoeic.
Yeah.
It sounds like what it is.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Yeah, smuggle is another one.
Was it?
Smuggle, it's not. Smuggle your own is what the jellyfish is called. It means seal snot.
Yeah, lovely.
Smuggle your own.
Lovely.
This was the pooka. This was a man. This was the devil, actually, supposed to be. And he went around the night before Halloween night, yeah, looking for children. And if the pooka put a cross on you, he put it on your cot outside the door. And actually, your cot, apparently I must have been left outside our cot, but you put up a cottage there today, and it was the very same as the cottage I lived in. And this cross would be put on the door going in and on the house going in, the way the pooka wouldn't come in, like, to sign the cross. So anyway, he got in one night and he went upstairs, apparently. My grandfather used to tell this one. And he went up along the stairs. No one saw him at all. And she was giving out the rosary, the grandmother, or the mother, I don't know which of them. But anyway, she couldn't get out the rosary beads to bless him. And she had a bottle of holy water. And she cut the bottle of water and she said, "Snotty nose, I'll drown you," she said. That's how she got rid of the pooka. So he didn't take any of his way. So that's a funny story, supposed to be. But I don't think that the present children of the country would believe the half of that. Like, he was evil, you see. This is what she was getting rid of. And they'd said the act of contrition, and there was no sign of a man going.
Nice. Come here to me. I'm going to go back to the games for you. Because this was this turning point in the year, there was a lot around your future, predicting your future, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, well, especially for matchmaking.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned there with Patrick Kennedy had with the Friars, well, a lot of us would have remembered the game probably 70s, 80s. There were loads of games around Halloween, and they were all about predicting the future. Good luck, who you're going to marry, or you're going to live, you're going to die, you're going to emigrate.
Apart from the Apple ones.
The Apple ones, yeah. Yeah. But the one you ran about with the ashes was played with a knife and white flour. That was played with that game was played with flour. Other games, whatever, I'm trying to figure out off the top of my head.
But while it's in my head, there was a Commission variant of the Apple was very dangerous.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to try it at home. What they do is they'd have a cross spinning from a string on the roof, or tied it to something on a height, and then they'd have a candle on each lighted on each side of one part of the cross, like so 2 candles, and then 2 apples on the other. And you'd be blindfolded, and you'd have to take your chances. And now the idea was you'd be aiming and stopping it at the same time if you got your aim right. Then if you missed, like your hair would catch fire or you'd be singed.
That's incredible.
So that was their one, sort of bit of the element of danger in it. But
no health and safety then?
No, I don't think so.
No health and safety. Yeah. But for those of you who remember, like even just come back to the food about predicting your future. The classic one now where we survived, we have barn bracks, and we have Colcannon. Now here's one thing, I grew up in a house where we always had Colcannon. Every Halloween night, without fail, my mother always had Colcannon, and my grandmother before, she always had Colcannon, and actually loads of neighbours around had Colcannon.
How did you make Colcannon?
Now there was I'm going to show you some photographs here, whatever. Colcannon was traditionally made a Halloween night, and basically for country people, for poorer people, when someone would call around your house looking for something, you either got a few pence, or if you didn't have a few pence, you'd have a big pot of Colcannon. Now you're talking a skillet pot, and I'm going to show you a skillet pot up here on the screen now. And a skillet pot, they came in different sizes depending on how much money you had to buy one or what size your open fire was. And basically everything was cooked in the open fire. And when I hear these fuckers talking now about Colcannon, these celebrity chefs talk about Colcannon, and people who never had Colcannon in the first place talk about Colcannon, it drives me up the walls because everything was cooked in one pot because that's all they fucking had, right? And in this case, it was like in Wexford, it was always, and I did a post on Facebook last year because I was getting fierce cranky about it, and I put it up, and straight away the people actually use Facebook. Actually, there's loads of people in their 60s and 70s using Facebook. Country people, women who actually came back on this the exact same. So there we had your PhD or research done there. Basically, when someone comes back to you, goes, I made it the exact same. So in our case, I'm going to show you now. You'd have spuds, cabbage, not kale.
It can be kale. Col means kale in Irish.
Yeah, well, maybe but the kale that we get now in the supermarket wasn't used. It was actually one woman from Duncormac or somewhere in the southwest Wexford said to me kale was only used to feed the cattle. Cabbage was juicier. So it was cabbage and onion and parsnip. And now some parts of the country it was carrots. Depending on what you'd have.
You throw anything in an onion or whatever the hell.
Yeah, an onion. Always an onion in it, right?
Onion, yeah. Right.
And then it was basically, and I'll show you the photographs there now. Small drop of water. In our case, it was half a pint of water, and if you're making in the size pot you'd have, and you'd slowly steam it. It was really steamy.
You forgot about the best bit, the mash.
Well, we mash it at the end. You pounded it. With poundies. And for those like now we've all mashers for mashing our spuds. But years ago they would have had even what do you call it? Didn't the Americans call the German hand grenades potato mashers? The German hand grenades because they actually they looked like mashers, potato mashers. They're a wooden masher.
Gotcha.
So that's for pounding.
I remember my granny 11 o'clock every morning she'd be pounding the mash for dinner for me. Call me grandad in. From the land.
But one of the things we always had growing up, we always called Colcannon as children. We always called it money dinner, and it was called money dinner is because on Halloween night when we were getting Colcannon, there'd always be money wrapped up in a piece of tin foil or something and stuck into the spuds. And basically that was you'd find it, and that was basically you got money if you're going to be wealthy. There was a ring put into it if you're going to get married. I can't remember me putting rings into it, but other people they put rings into it. They put certain things into it, like the exact same as the barn brack. In the barn brack, you put a ring into it. You put a P for you want to have a child next year.
Ring is marriage.
Ring is marriage. A rag meant you were going to be poor. Stick meant you were going to get hardship. So there were all these little symbols.
Can you imagine a 7-year-old child getting the ring? I mean, at least, you're not going to be, as they would have called it back then, a spinster or a bachelor.
Yeah.
But that whole marriage thing was big tied up to be whether you were going to be an outsider and completely marginalised, or whether you were part of the community. Marriage, if you weren't married, you weren't part of the community, and yet you had to live out your days as an inferior. And that's so there was a not nice side to it. And also, if you did get the stick, that you could have been in a coffin then. And then, wasn't that like Joyce's tale in the Dubliners? He has the saucers, the three saucers, the blindfold.
Yeah.
One is clay, one is water, and the other, I forget what the other one. Maybe it's a ring.
It can be depending. Yeah. Did he? The
Water's drowning. Yeah, he did, and clay was buried. That we weren't going last time. Water could be like
water was emigration.
Oh yeah, you go to sea. And the ring.
Yeah.
You're part of this community. You're part of society because you're going to get married.
Yeah. We'll to pull back here, right? So. Colcannon and Brack, those symbols Robbie was on about. The plate game that we had in Wexford, and again it was played all over the country, the plate game or the saucer game, you can have 5 or 6 saucers depending on what, you can have a holy medal, you're going to be a nun or a priest or a crucifix. Water, you're going to emigrate. Clay, you're going to die. Stick for hardship. And all those, and it changed. Sometimes you get nails in it. I've come across people saying there were nails in it. I don't know what nail went. But interesting what you said now. Again, this shift, this big blunt hatchet thing that came to Ireland, whatever, and we want to call it in the 60s or whenever it happened, where we start to mass produce stuff and we started to buy stuff. So we started to buy bar and bracks. And there's an interesting when we started to buy bar and bracks that the only one symbol that we left to use was the ring. Yeah. And there was this kind of all cut up around the whole notion of marriage and conformity and
I think it could be, but like when my mother made bar and bracks in the 70s anyway. She only left in the ring. Yeah. I suppose it was just a simpler way of doing it. I think tradition was on the way out.
And it's a funny one. I'm going to show you a video in a while. We did it up in Carlow last year. I was working on a project up there, and we're doing it. It was a housing estate this time last year, and
it said that barn means barine. Barine is a loaf. Brack is speckled.
Speckled, yeah.
But around here they call it barn. Barn brack. There would be an M in it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Barney brack in other places.
But one of the things, Robbie, is it's a grey area. Well, not a grey area. It's a funny one because a whole new generation. If you get a child and going to put his hand into a saucer of clay, are you going to tell the child, the 7-year-old, you're going to die, or are you going to say you're going to be a gardener? Do you know that kind of way?
But there's a new creative one though, where you do you have what they do with cold pasta. And the child has to put their hands in, and they've got to, and it's like a spook. There's a whole lot of different ways of doing it. Yeah. So you've got something that looks like a hand, a dead man's hand, or something. Yeah. Something else that looks like a pair of eyes. So they put their hand in, they get a shock, they get a fright. Yeah. So I think that the whole that tradition still lives on. So it's not about really taking seriously what's going to happen, but it's the fright. Yeah, it's the fright that you get. Good grief! I don't want to. That's. I think that's what it comes down to. That sort of very visceral emotion, really. Yeah, I'm going to play this video of these young lads from Carlow playing a game here last year up in Carlow town.
You can have a go when everyone else has a go. You can have another go then, can't you?
No, not yet.
Hands back.
Hands behind your back.
Just by your side for a minute then.
Right, you ready? So from there, all the way down. Draw it down. Yeah! I knew I was going to get the ring over there. Pick on you. Ooh, Brianna. Ooh. Right, whatever you want to do, like, stop. Brianna! I'm going to get married! Brianna's getting married!
So there were some young lads recorded up in Doreen Heights in Carlow last year. But there were loads of other games, Robbie, weren't there?
By the way, is it Doreen Heights or Doreen Heights?
Doreen Heights, I call it, but maybe Doreen, I don't know, maybe I'm getting it.
Because there's a lad called Piat, and he says around there, it's a big thing with him, the river Derreen, he said it's spelled Doreen.
Yeah.
He said, but it's actually pronounced up there Derreen.
Yeah, great.
It's a big, I don't know, it's a linguist dividing line. We
Yeah.
won't bother everybody here with syllable stress, but Munster versus non-Munster. But anyway, talking about this, what do you call it, we were talking about the bobbing for coins.
Yeah.
And you got to put your head in the basin.
Yeah.
And you got to, and I think it's again, money is a symbol. There was, I don't think they would have had much coins.
Yeah.
There might have, if there were a shilling or two around the place, maybe that'd be there, or a penny, and you'd try it out. But because I remember it wasn't big money either. Like we were looking at tuppences, and I don't think it was all that healthy now looking back on it. But should you be?
No, it wouldn't be that healthy now. To be fair, yeah.
And once somebody didn't throw your head in under as well while you were at it, like you know, just for the fun, like you know.
But as you said earlier on, that idea of just that sensation of your eyes closed, or just the chance of your hand going in and feeling something else or whatever. So
very visceral.
Yeah. One of the things, there was a few things I've come across that kind of there's loads of similarities. That's the other thing we kind of stress here is that I've been banging on about Halloween for about 20 years because I suppose a direct connection with it through my mother and my grandmother, right? That's the truth of it, right? But we should never. We're kind of, there's a national narrative out there that's it's an Irish tradition. Like it was Irish, but it was also found in the Isle of Man. It was found in Wales. It was found in Cornwall. It was found in parts of England. And it was found in Scotland, and Brittany and other parts of Europe as well. So we're not alone here. There's a kind of part of a wider European celebration this time of the year. But one of the things, like the Welsh stuff I was coming across, was like lovely things where you'd get your shoes. Again, this idea of looking into the future. Young girls would put their shoes in the shape of a T at the end of their bed. And then when they go to bed that night, then they'd go, I put my shoes in the shape of a T, hoping my true love for to see, not in apparel or array, but in an old clothes of his everyday. So there was loads of kind of, you'd find out who your lover was going to be. Or
Divination.
Divination, yeah.
That's very, very much the Druids, very back, the old Celtic.
Yeah.
They were big into divination, as the Romans were, I suppose. All the holy people.
Yeah.
The Druids massively so.
Yeah.
If their word was their bond, and if they said something was going to happen, it was going to happen.
Yeah. And another one, like the Sown was another I came across in Wales as well, was hemp seed I saw her. So basically, come close to midnight, you'd walk around the church and you'd throw hemp seed, and when you'd be throwing the hemp seed, you'd be saying, was it a hemp seed? Something like these words: hemp seed I do sow, let him or her that comes to me mow. And you'd look behind and you'll see that the woman or the man you're going to marry behind you. But if you saw a man with a side, or you saw a shape for a coffin, it meant you were going to die. So there was all these kind of, like, we're not alone in.
You had to do it around midnight.
Close to midnight, yeah. But funny, in our tradition, you could never be out after midnight on that night. We were always told you have to be, you could not be out because that's for the dead.
But see, young lads now, what they do, they take advantage, because up until recently, people had put out meals for the dead.
Yeah.
And but some, I suppose, opportunistic young lads would come in and they'd know that the food would be out.
Yeah.
And so they'd take advantage, they'd help themselves go in.
Yeah.
And then when the owner, the person of the house, would come down in the morning, sure, that only confirmed, geez, they're after eating it. That's great, sure. They think the dead ones are after eating it.
What Robbie's on about, it's like I'm going to play a few clips, Robbie, right? My grandmother always believed that the souls came back on the second on the second day. They had tied in with the second because the church fixed the second. But it was that the souls came back and you left a fire lighting, the door open, and a basin of water out, and a little fire lighting, and to come back. And I've recorded accounts from Wexford to Donegal to Mayo, and I recorded an incredible account up in Dublin recently with two women, and they're two traveller women, talking about the souls coming back. Well, I played for you.
Oh, jeez.
Because it's lovely.
Well, in my younger days, I don't know, they used to sweep up the floor, leave it nice and clean, and the chair there with the towel and a little basin of water on, and a nice little fire on, and that's all I know, and a candle. And you wouldn't be allowed to stir that candlestick wherever they'd put it when they'd light it.
All Souls Night you didn't throw out tea or any liquids. You put them in a bucket or a basin at the end of the kitchen, and you left the back and the front door opened for the souls to come through, that there was welcome for them. And we used to be, it was so real, it was so important, like we really felt that our grannies and granddads were coming through.
Like on All Souls, like nobody went out of the house. Well, we didn't anyhow, because they always believed like that the dead came back to visit.
So All Souls night, and you did the visits. So you went to the Friary, or we used to Friary because it was the nearest to us, and you did an Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory for each person of your family that was predeceased you. And then you did the round of the town afterwards, look in the windows. The windows be all dressed up for Holy Thursday night. And then you went home and you set the table for people that were dead belonging to you, and you left them out food. You let them play set, and you let them food, and you lit a candle and you went to bed. And you presumed that they would come. Of course, someone was there again in the morning, nothing was gone. But you did it automatically, year in, year out. And that was the eve of.
Is that the same as your story?
Yeah.
What did you do on All Souls Day?
They said mass for anyone was gone before. The lads went to mass. I used to mass there and lit candles. Obviously, Mammy going up and lighting candles. You know, she lighted
My dad used to buy candles.
Yeah.
A big long candle. I think it was only tuppence or something for the big long candle. And maybe get 6 or 7 of them. And Mammy was very careful for, like, children had been more now since that, but she used to have an old bucket and she'd fill it full of sand and she'd light all the candles. That's for my Mammy and that's for my daddy, Lord of Mercy, and that's for such a fella died with such a thing last week. And light all the candles, every one of the candles.
On All Souls Night?
And All Souls Night.
Yeah.
And they be in the front of the tent. We'd be in the tent, but they be say as far as that thing away. And you'd see them all lighting, all the candles lighting, and it was real pitch dark. There be no electric lights
Peaceful
or anything.
spell, yeah.
And it'd be real peaceful, and them candles would burn the next morning down into the sand. The old sand that used to get, and they'd burn down into the sand. Or you stick them in a potato, make a hole in the potato, and you stick the candle down the potato. Put the potatoes around the edge of the fire, and they had candles all around it, and they'd all burn out.
Pray then before you go to bed, and pray when you get up in the morning.
Also, it's night now, like people, when we go to mass and light a few candles or whatever, but we wouldn't. We'd have to go to bed, and my daddy'd light the candles, and he'd say, "Okay, go in now and let him go around wherever he wants to go." My daddy, Mammy would be going around now, and my brother this, my brother that, and my sister this. But we'd be laughing about that, David. You know, where are they? So I don't see anybody, David. Where are they? What's wrong with you? I'm telling you now, daughter. Give me a chance. I'm walking around tonight. Mammy's walking around, my daddy's walking around. And you won't know, when your daddy Mammy's gone, you'll know your daddy Mammy All Souls Night, you're not to be out around the place. And always have that in your head, never go around the place. That was the rule. You never go around the place All Souls Night. You've made out outside.
Usually done that as well, yeah.
I couldn't peg at now. Or 4 at now. If you only had a bit of bread, you weren't out for it outside. When you ate, maybe the crust would be there. And you want to throw to bed to the dog, you weren't out to throw that bread. Put it on the table there till in the morning, on top of the box there till the morning. No business pegging out, all we can is pegging out old people walking up and down.
Because you'd be afraid you'd hit the souls.
Afraid to hit the souls.
My mother had the one of throwing out the water. She wouldn't throw water out. So
No, my dad wouldn't throw anything out, Lamerson. Nothing. He wouldn't the house out.
And All Souls Night.
And All Souls Night.
Well, to me, All Souls is for the dead, right? It's my mother taught us. For the dead, you leave out tea, milk and sugar and that, you know. Bread, bit of homemade bread she used to bake as well. Like, I can't bake, I never did bake. And probably whatever she'd had, maybe a bit of cheese or whatever be there, she'd leave it out on a plate. But she'd get up the next morning and be gone. So she used to say All Souls come, but maybe one of my brothers could have been at eating it, I don't know. You know, but I never touched it. But my kids asked me to do it now. this year gone up, but I hadn't got my own home, so because I'm homeless. They're like, "Me mummy, can we leave something out for Daddy for All Souls night? Because my husband's the year dead there in November gone." And I said, "We may wait till we get our own house before we can do it for Daddy." You know.
Come in, I want to come in like
I tell him, he's not. How's Daddy going to find us here? Daddy don't know where we are. When we get our own place, Daddy will follow us, and then we can do it for him. You know, because we're homeless at the moment. So.
But when you get your home, you're going to do it.
When I get my own home, I'm going to start, because he died in November, you know what I mean, last year, so we're going through a tough patch.
So, there you have it.
With a living, breathing tradition still.
Absolutely. That woman, without her home, and her husband passed away, not knowing where to put the candle to welcome the husband back. There it is, alive.
Well, especially, I suppose, we have the whole problem of housing in this day and age. It's shocking today that we live in the early 21st century, and we do have that problem of state organised homelessness, and it's as true for the settled population as it is for the travellers too, and it's hitting everybody, and it's well, I suppose it's moral, but anyway, back to folklore.
Yeah, and I suppose yeah.
We're lucky that we do have it. That those of us who do have a roof, and we can celebrate as we like. Coming the night or the nights.
And some of you out there will probably do it yourselves. I think it was done up and down the country. I'd do it. So Mammy and Granny did it. Your probably mother and father probably did it as well. You'd always leave the candle in the window as well. You'd always leave the candle to welcome the souls back. And again, that's probably borrowing, Robbie, from. Probably, again, borrowing from the whole fire, because if you look at Christmas, there were huge bonfires at Christmas, or Yule log, bigger fires, then we have little lights on Christmas trees, or even in the May bush we had bonfires. Then in some parts of Wexford here you'd have a little burning candles on the May bush itself.
Yule log was Norse, Yuletide.
Yeah.
I think we're all at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're all at it. Actually, one of the things was I came across a recording that Peter Kennedy did back with, oh God, what's her name? There was a husband and wife called Woods. I can't off the top of my head. I can't remember her name. Back in the Isle of Man.
Oh yeah.
And just to show how not different we are, really, because there's so many shared customs. It's an audio recording where they're talking about Halloween traditions. They're talking about the ghosts, and was talking about the ghosts on the roof, was that?
That's right.
And the dead come back.
1966. This was.
Yeah.
And they were old enough at the time. So we're talking about memories probably going back to the late 19th century.
Yeah.
And they could even remember people speaking Manx, like their parents speaking Manx.
Yeah.
Or Gaelic, what the woman calls it.
Yeah.
That we'll have to put the link up for that, because it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to play the audio of it now. I'm going to play this audio of the interview with Peter Kennedy and this husband and wife. I think, or husband and wife or brother and sister. I'm not sure. Don't go me on it.
I think it's husband and wife.
Husband and wife. I'll stick it on for you here now, and just talking about the souls coming back on that night.
You were saying previously that the Halloween custom has changed.
Yes, nowadays the children come round with the lanterns made of turnips and moots, we call them, with a candle in, and they knock on the door and they sing a sort of gibberish that they don't really know what it's all about. And they ask more or less for pennies. But years ago, lads used to go round to the back of the houses and they used to beat on the doors with a cabbage bomb, which was the stem of a cabbage, and sing the jingle or the rhyme and run away before anybody caught them. That was the whole point. You were never caught. It was, sort of a romp, really, on that night. And nobody expected pennies or anything like that. That was the last thing they wanted, was to be caught and given something.
On that same night, you were asking me just now what I remember, and I do remember something that I haven't thought of for maybe 30 years. My mother and my father used to warn me about being in bed before midnight on that night, because the ghosts of everybody who died during the year would be sitting on the roofs of the houses. My mother used to say they'd be sitting on the thigh bones. I've never found a Gaelic word that would translate, except that thigh might be tai, which is house. They'd be probably sitting on the thatch of the house, and if you were out after midnight or even awake, there was a possibility that they would come down. And my father, who was a very sort of level man, he swore that he met his father one night at that time after midnight, and that his father said to him, "Go home, the day for you and the night for me." And ever after that, my father would never dream of going out after midnight, or rather being out after midnight on that night, because it coincides with a very wild and stormy time in the Isle of Man, and before any proper lighting or anything, it would be very creepy, wouldn't it?
Was that the most important sort of custom of the year, that particular time? Or
It was really the most important custom, because October 1st, 31st, November 1st was the old Feast of the Witches, and although it was overlaid by Christianity a very great deal, I haven't got my head, but I've got my notes at home. I went into this quite a lot years ago, and we seem to have gone in very much for witches and things. We've always said they were white witches, but we've always had a great respect for that sort of thing. And really, it was New Year's Day, you see. November the 1st was very much New Year's Day, as far as I know, in the sort of witch calendar. And October 31st, November 1st was a very, very important time.
So there was a Joe and Winifred Woods, or Joe and Winnie Woods from the Isle of Man. One of the things actually we were talking about, Robbie, again, was something which we did here, was we all know this. Well, we know it. We assume everyone knows it. Like, we've always known that we carved turnips or sugar beet, depending on what you had here in Wexford, and was done the same. Clare was done the same up the country as well, and basically carved them because we didn't have pumpkins. Pumpkins weren't part of the deal here until probably the 80s. Really, a lot of us started to see pumpkins early.
Yeah, well, it came in from America.
Yeah, it came from America. Yeah, and when we brought the whole tradition to America, the whole they started to carve pumpkins. They call them jack-o'-lanterns or jack-o'-lanterns.
Well, that came from Ireland, jack-o'-lanterns originally, and I suppose originally it comes from Jack was supposed to be, it's the same as Will-o'-the-Wisp, but as the myth, but jack-o'-lantern was basically the blacksmith, and there's it's a very old legend, or a fairy tale, I suppose, but it's basically, he does a deal with the devil because the devil comes to take him away, and he says, look, I'll do a deal with you, if you, okay, he does a deal when one way or the other. The devil comes back 7 years later. Now your time is up. Doesn't he trick the devil? And he puts the devil in a bad way, so the devil has to give him another 7 years and loads of wealth. And then the devil comes back again. He tricks the devil again. So the devil is so fed up with him after 21 years. The devil says, "Look, right, that's it. I'm not coming back again." So he goes up to go to heaven, and Peter says, "You're not getting in here anyway. You're too tricky." So he goes down to hell then, and the devil says, "You must be joking. I'm not letting you in." So the devil gives him a rushlight to find his way, and I suppose jack-o'-lantern is supposed to be, it's connected with that story. But then Ichabod Crane is another one that's similar, because the Celts were always very much into beheading people, and the whole idea of the head that's supposed to be symbolised with with the light in the head as well. That the head was a very spiritual type of a thing. And it probably represented spirits, but it was also supposed to be putting out these things outside the house, was supposed to, or in the window, was supposed to be guides for the dead. You know, and so it's
and like the candle in the window for All Souls Day. Again, they're all these borrowed. They're all intertwined. Like, again, in my line of work, I've tons of recordings of people talking about Willie the Wisp or Jack the Lantern. We call it Jack the Lantern. And I was only talking about this last night to someone. Like, I have a recording of my grandmother from 2002. Granny was born in 1912. So we have accounts, living accounts from her. She was completely on the ball from probably 1980, 1990, when you start to remember those things as a child. But she always remembers looking out the window and seeing Jack-o'-lantern, or seeing Jack-o'-lantern, the Willie the Wisp, walking up by the river in the Byrie Bog near between Kilmuckridge and Killanena. And it's interesting as well, Robbie, that whole tradition of that you can't stress the importance of place. And I was trying to explain this to someone last night. You can have stories, and you can have let's even go back at it. Certain parts of the country didn't celebrate Halloween the same way as other parts did. It was really strong in County Wexford. It was really strong in other parts of probably Wicklow, Kildare, up to Dublin, and up to Ulster counties, right? So we're we're at a stage now where it's becoming popular and the culture is spreading and people are kind of taking it on, whatever. But there's something really interesting about the connection to place. I kind of find interesting when you have stories connected with a place. I.e., I can now drive by a bridge where I believe that my grandmother saw Jack the Lantern going. Now, whether it was true or not, I don't know, and I don't really care. But still, those stories are really important. And it goes back to a deeper sense of people connected to a landscape where these stories are actually, the stories are where there was a haunted road or where the black dog was seen.
God, yeah. Well, in rural Ireland you get that. Well, you do get it in urban.
You do.
You do. And we had the Fairy Lane near us, and there was never a house built on it.
Yeah.
And it's about a mile long, and there is a cemetery there, like. But it's called the Fairy Lane for a reason. It's supposed to be haunted. You wouldn't go down there at night.
Yeah.
And then it actually runs from Paradise, which is actually a real name of a townland.
Yeah.
It runs from Paradise, I think, to the Fide.
Yeah.
So, which means the green, on Fahid.
Yeah.
And Fahid. But they also, there's a whole load, and there are particular areas that are supposed to be associated with where you'd expect, if you didn't have your jacket on the right way at night time,
get lost.
That you would you'd be taken in for to be doing some favour if you were a musician or something like that, you know.
Yeah. So I can't underestimate the strength in people connecting to the places in which they live, whether you're in County Donegal or whether you're in Leitrim or Roscommon or whether you're in Wexford, those connections to the stories. So we can all go online now and find stories. We can all go online now and read books, or we can all go online and look at films about, and it's all this great knowledge in your head, but there's still something magic about placing that knowledge in a place. And when you're standing in a place, whether you're singing a song that was written about a fishing disaster that took place there 150 years ago, or where lads were shot, or where there was something buried, there's a different magic, and there's a different magic happens when you've got a pile of neighbours or a pile of people, don't even have to be all neighbours, standing there hearing that account in that place. There's something else happens, and it's not tied in with cultural tourism or bed nights or the bold falsification of Ireland. It's tied in with just people connecting with place.
Yeah, well, what's happening is that people are now commodities, so they're not supposed to. Rural Ireland isn't sustainable, so everybody's supposed to leave once they're 20 years of age. They leave their secondary school. They go up to get a job or become an entrepreneur. Go up to the cities and become part of the big melting pot, or else go over to New York or go over to London, or else it could be China now in the near future, because we're all just economic units there to produce, and we're removed from the old traditions. Anyway,
well, and also the fact as well, there's I think they're feeling this down in the Skelligs and places like that now as well. Whatever this idea of when something becomes a cultural for cultural tourism, people are tripping, people can't move, people. When things are done for the wrong reasons in some ways,
There is, I think there's an uneasy friction listening to Radio Gael talk to down in Kerry. It does come up from time to time that they do wonder, look, there's traffic jams, there's problems of people here just coming in just to go to the toilet from the big bus tour, and they're not spending any money. And then there's other people putting questions saying, look, is this really what we need for a community, to have all this, having a few people making the money and having the rest of them just sort of kowtowing, and it's not all that sustainable, really. And when you're talking about and during the winter it's hardly existent at all, and then you've got this whole so you couldn't really base an economy. You're not going to keep young people there with it, and then you've got this whole our carbon emissions. So you're really, what we should be doing is, I think, cutting back on flights all over the world unless they're necessary. This whole tour, that's a different thing. But that also means people coming into the country and marketing the whole of Ireland as this big cash cow.
Well, absolutely. Ancient Ireland East signs are starting in Tipperary now, I see, and going up as far as Leitrim. But listen, that's a different story.
Shakedown. What was the actor who said it was a big shakedown? He called it this...
Gabriel Byrne, was it?
Oh, it was Gabriel, yeah.
Gabriel Byrne. Speaking of shakedowns here, I'm going to shake down here with my granny, right? I'm going to show you a video of her talking about seeing a light actually shaking down or walking down along the river in the Byrie Bog. This was in 2002. And I'm going to show you some more clips of some men from different parts of Wexford talking about seeing lights, and lights were always kind of common. Now, it's not necessarily tied in with Halloween, but it is tied in with the jack-o'-lantern. The jack-o'-lantern is associated with a light, or the Willy the Wisp associated with a light, and that's kind of part of that kind of Halloween folklore that we have. So I'll show you this.
Yes, I saw jack-o'-lantern. We used to see him every night when we'd be going to bed. My mother would always say, "Come here now, you see jack-o'-lantern walking all along the river up there to Bridget." We go all along the river bank with a lantern, you see it.
And you could see him.
You'd see the, well, you wouldn't see him, but you'd see the light.
Yeah.
Willie the Wisp now, he'd lead you astray. He'd come in the form of a light, and you're following the light. Now that time there was no lights or anything along the roads, everything was completely pitch dark. And you followed the light and he'd lead you astray, and you'd have to stay wherever you were all night, wherever he'd lead you to. The next morning till it get bright, till you see where you were. I often heard tell of Willie the Wisp, I did indeed.
Yeah, there was another one, Jackie the Lantern. Did you ever hear of him?
Just tell him that's
Yeah, well, they reckon if you go in a field, and his light is around there, do you know what I mean? That you will not get out of that field till the daylight come in the morning. You can't find the gate. You'll keep going around. But I did see them lights, you know, when I was a youngster, but I was scared, you know what I mean? I'd be scared, you know, I used to even go on me tippy toes when I was a youngster. It'd be this house. It was supposed to be haunted.
Yeah.
You know, and they tell you, you know, when you go around, you know, to those old farmers' place and that, you know, for winter's evening and that. Oh, they got so-and-so will be back tonight. This is their birthday. They're dead now 20 odd years, you know. And today is their birthday. They'll be back. And just I'd be going home, you know, along by that house, and I go on my tippy toes, you know. I'm thinking that they're alive in there.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Nearly 20 years ago, I wasn't living around here. I was living down in a place called Ratsella, Hallamstown. And my wife, God rest her, was with me that time, and I had a little girl. And I used to go out of a Sunday night, like down Forest Cammers for a drink. So this night I went out and I took out the car, and I come around the corner of the house, and I was looking out up over Carrickburn, like I thought. I see this big ball of fire in the sky, and it was real low, and I started watching it. And I said watching it for surely I did, oh God, I did for a good 10 minutes. And it was moving on, and it was as big as a balloon now, maybe. But it moved away off, way out over Cammers, on out that way. And which is, I thought, wherever it went, I thought it went down. So I put no more pass on it, but I didn't tell my wife on it because she might be nervous and maybe I mightn't get to go for the drink. But about 2 months after, or it could be 3 months, I was going out one night and my wife's cousin was in. I had proof of it this time, you see. I went out and I looked and I seen it was coming the very same way. And I called them all out. And they seen it the same as what I did. And it was going the very same direction. A big ball of fire, red as blood. And I went on the very, very same direction. We watched it, and I went, and which is we thought it went down again. And I don't know what it ever was. So that was twice I seen, but I had proof the last time that it wasn't, because I had my neighbours were in, like, and they brought him out to see it.
Where was that last lad from?
That man, I recorded in Raheen in about 2005 or 6. I think he was South Kilkenny, Wexford border. Accent is gorgeous, isn't it?
Amazing.
Oh, God, lovely accent.
One of the last Irish-speaking places, Glenmore, County Kilkenny.
Wow.
Irish spoken up in the 1940s there.
Wow. One of the things he mentions about was the dead again. There was a great kind of thing, I suppose, we are so used to Halloween now with the gores and the guts of the horror films, whatever. But I suppose there was always an element of kind of ghost stories in the loose bracket we call them growing up. But one of the ones, whatever, was the dead came back, and that would have been tied in with All Souls Day. And actually, one thing, Robbie, that my mother always said, remember we heard back the travelling women talking about they wouldn't throw a piece of bread out.
Yeah.
And my mother had it was that you'd never throw anything out, no water or dirty, because there was no sinks, there was only no basin of water, and you'd throw it out at night time or empty the teapot. And Mammy and them said, you say, hug of the teapot, Jack. And that meant basically you were warning the souls that you were...
you found that in Mayo too, though, didn't you?
I did. I found it. Women in Mayo, I couldn't believe it, in 2007. And women in Mayo said, oh yeah, hug of the Tishka Salach. And basically they were... when the
dirty water.
Yeah, before the throw out thing, they'd say this. So the souls would hear them then, and the souls would scatter, and they'd throw the water out.
Now the thing...
Yeah. But another one we used to know here was...
after 12 o'clock, you never threw out water without saying, hugga, tisk sala. The fairies were outside, so don't disturb them. And I remember Mother the Lord, she was seeing you going near the door with some water. Don't throw that water out, she'd say, because the fairies, you drench the fairies. We're so frightened of the fairies in time.
Now, the thing is, that was done all year round in many places because people didn't, when if you'd thrown out dirty water at all, you were just warning the fairies to get out of the way. Because, you had to, because you didn't want anything to, they didn't know that people, as far as they were concerned, if somebody had a stroke, that was the fairies getting their own back for something you did wrong.
Yeah.
Or if somebody had a heart attack, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
And, or because just think about it, your arm goes dead, no reason, you're getting tingles. And you're thinking, just because I passed that point in the field. So it was like a magical explanation for medical stuff. But also, it definitely is... Jason, I lost the train in my top, but work with it.
No, but the hunger, one thing you're on about sensations.
Yeah.
One of the things actually talking about sensations actually was a thing I've come across at Mayo, and I did come across it in Wexford, and I've come across it, people out in Connemara saying it as well, and they come across it on land and on sea. On land in particular, and Sligo was the same, called the hungry grass, the fear gurta. When you'd walk across a certain stretch of field or an area, you'd get you get hungry instantly, right?
Jesus.
And it said it was tied in to times of the famine, where people would have either died or would have died.
Well, Kennedy mentions that up around Mount Leinster, there's a place where that exactly the same thing would happen. That you get the munchies.
Yeah.
And
that was pre-famine.
Oh, definitely. 1817 to 22. Anyway.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because there's a hungry grass down in I know of it. There's a car park now in Mars Castle, and it's called the Hungry. Well, the locals call it the Hungry Grass, but now it's a car park. So there's a chipper nearby, so maybe you get the smell of the chips when you're walking through it. And I don't know. We're getting
very good.
Yeah. Well, come here to me. One of the things was actually. Oh God, I was thinking. You mentioned earlier on about this devil coming along and whipping someone up and taking them off.
Oh, that's the pooka.
The pooka, yeah.
Actually, no, pooka is. I don't know. We see different parts of the country have different ways, like they do different names for tunes, but also different names for different things. So I think it's in Munster, a pooka can be a ghost of any type, but in the rest of the country, that's a taisha or a taibsha. Now that's, but the pooka is a specific thing. It's like a horse with a man's head, and it will take you. It flies, and it's a particular type of ghost, and the same with a shifra is another type of ghost, and then there's all different types. And now a ghost wouldn't be the word you'd use, or a fetch or something. Yeah. But it's not really a ghost because it's real. You touch it and it takes you places. It does things.
Yeah, Granny had an insect at home called a shit pooka. It was a little shield bug, she called it. Remember?
And then we had the shellicky pookie, a word for a snail.
Snail, yeah. So basically, because now we've these very loose brackets of a fairy, and due to Jesus, I don't know.
That's right, because he did have horns. The pooka,
a
man's head with horns, and a horse's back, a horse's mane and all.
Yeah. I came across a song there actually. There was very few there's one thing that struck me, there were very few songs in our song tradition around Halloween. And I came across one there recently, only one. I've come across some I'm going to play one from the Isle of Man in a while.
Yeah, the Blacks had the Little Skillet Pot. I think that was based around Colcannon in the Little.
Yeah.
That would have been one, but there are very few, I think.
Yeah. There's one here was Eddie Butcher. I got it on ITMA, the Irish Traditional Music Archive. It's a great, fantastic archive in Dublin, Merrion Square in Dublin. It's online if you can't get it in person. Here's this was recorded by recorded by Hugh Shields in July 1968, and it's Eddie Butcher, and it goes.
Saturday night is holy night, the quality's all terrain. And he who has his bride to meet at the 5 mile brigg he'll bide. First you'll meet the black, and second you'll meet the brown, and catch the baby the bridal rein, and pull the rider down. And then he got his wife there.
Jeez. Well, there's